Welcome to latest edition of Leadership and Culture in Healthcare. I'm Matthew Winn, your host, and I am delighted I am with Tony Young. Tony, look, loads of people that listen to this will know exactly who you are, but for those that don't, who are you? What do you do? And let's then drill into how on earth you got to be doing that.
Hi, Matthew, and thank you for your kind introduction. You mean the sane people who don't know who I am? I think that's most of them. But actually, maybe I've come to realise that, just not being normal, being a bit crazy, being on the edge, actually is where change happens. So, and maybe lots of people who know me are the slightly crazy ones, maybe. Who knows? Anyway, right. So I'm Tony Young. I am still a practicing plumber from Essex. I am a urological surgeon at Southend Hospital. Have been there my 18th year now. I am also associate medical director there, responsible for innovation, transformation, commercial procurement, digital, lead for outpatients, transformation too. Those are all from a clinical perspective, I should say. At Anglia Ruskin University, I'm the chair and director of innovation and entrepreneurship, and we do a whole range of things there, including running the National Entrepreneur Programme for NHS England. And at NHS England for the last 12 years now, I've been the National Clinical Lead or National Clinical Director for Innovation. Now sitting in the Innovation Research and Life Science team as part of the Transformation Directorate at NHS England. But I think the reason, going back to my academic job, I'm not much of an academic, but when I was a junior doctor, I started 4 companies, raised £5 million, exited them all, nearly lost my house. And I learned a lot of lessons about businesses, and that's why I think where my interest through kind of innovation entrepreneurship. So I do those things. I'm also a non-exec director on an investment trust in the City of London. And the reason I took that on was because I wanted to understand how big money worked and moved, and the governance arrangements that were placed around it, because I thought that would be really helpful to me understanding how I could bring that skill from another sector, that knowledge and experience, into healthcare and the NHS, and would that help me? And I've learned loads. Firstly, I have learned lots of things, how the city works, and I tell you, healthcare is quite a safe, regulated place. Our money, I'm not sure it's safe. I'm not sure at all. But there are really great people trying to make it so, and they have to put, laws and regulations and processes and governance systems in place to try and help that. Doesn't mean occasionally someone doesn't drive a coach and horses through it, though. But we see that in the media. Anyway, sorry. So that's what I do. It's kind of
Just that.
Lots of side hustles on being a surgeon. Yeah, I think that's what I'd say.
Let's just unpack that slightly, though, because you reeled off kind of 4 or 5 things, frankly, massive in their own right. So you're not only a jobbing consultant, you're an associate medical director, NHS England role, kind of self-possessed, academic with Anglia Ruskin, and running the clinical entrepreneurial program that many will know and admire. Just let's start with, as a clinical leader amongst all of that, how do you find time to make an impact when you've got 5 or 6 at least chunky, really responsible things in there?
A great question. So I think you have to know yourself, and you have to understand what you want to do with your life. I was very fortunate at NHS England. I had an old boss called Ian Dodger. Well, he was a young boss, because even though Ian, I used to joke with him about it, Ian, you look older than me, but he was actually younger than me.
We share the same heritage there. He was my boss as well.
Yeah. And so Ian, I don't think he could quite get his head around me for a while. And we went out for dinner one night, and I just let loose, and I told him a whole load of different things that were going on. And he said, "Do you know, Tony, you need coaching." And he arranged for me to have coaching. There was a kind of senior leadership program at NHS England at the time. And I got Dame Una O'Brien, who was the former permanent secretary at the Department of Health, as my coach. And, you know, I've got a PhD in neuroscience. And so I've always had a passion for understanding how the brain works and the psychology that sits on top of that, that runs our operating system in our minds. I've had a real interest of that and read around it and apply kind of the neuropsychology of leadership in what I do. But combining that with modern coaching theory is, and Una was so wonderful. It felt like it was 2 hours a month for 6 months, I think, and it felt like a luxury for my mind, for my brain. Someone who I knew of and respected and was senior was actually giving me the time just to listen and use a number of tools and structures and help me think through, why did I think like that? Why did I feel like that? And how could I positively direct that? And, you know, as a surgeon, I don't think I really knew what coaching was. I knew a little bit about mentorship at the time. And Una I think we both learned the loads, because she had never, I don't think she'd ever coached anyone who'd got a PhD in neuroscience and understood the psychology of it like I did. And I think the two of us learned us an enormous amount. And I got to understand really much about my mind and the operating system and how it works and the assumptions it makes and those things. So getting back to answer your question, I learned about my core values. And if you're familiar with the work of psychologists like Jung and Rogers, who are dead and gone now, but if you look at then Bob Keegan, so Robert Keegan, the professor of organizational psychology at the Harvard Postgraduate School for Education, probably, in my view, the greatest living psychologist. His best book, Immunity to Change, it's hard work, but boy, if you go through it, and it's kind of, I think it's one of the best leadership management books there is. And it was really interesting. A number of leaders I've met across the years have actually known all about Bob and used his, well, some very senior people in government, actually. Anyway, so I got to understand through that process that actually what my core values are, what these kind of neurological marker posts that have been set down in my brain as it grew in its first kind of 35 years of development. And if you can, Anuna, help me understand those and know them and help me realize that if you align your life and what you're doing according to your values, these superconducting highways, low energy, super efficient things in your mind, then you lead a fulfilled life. And do you know, when you're living according to your values, you can operate at super speed and scale at multiple things, because it's like trying to say to a concert pianist, can you play this tune? And they're amazing. But if you ask me to play piano, I mean, Les Dawson would look good, if some of your listeners remember who Les Dawson is, playing the piano. So being aligned with what your values are, what you're really good at, what you've practiced at, and then do you know, you can do multiple things. And that's why I think I do multiple things. They all overlap. They share some core values about equity and justice, about creativity, around autonomy, around making a difference, around education, around family, around community. And you bring all of those things together. And if you can then construct a career, you go around that with those things, you go, it works. And you can be like supercharged. But when you have to do something in life that runs against those, and you can't escape from them, they don't align with your values, and you can't escape, that's when you burn out. That's when it takes too much of your brain energy. Well, you know, we're starting to learn now. One of my great things at NHS England, I have to know a little bit about everything there is to know in healthcare and life sciences. So, and my PhD was also partly in rocket physics as well, bizarrely. So I did do a bit of quantum. And you know, the stuff we're understanding about quantum biology and consciousness and how the mind works, And I mean, it's such an exciting time in discoveries in what we're doing. So, and then you apply that to adult learning, and how do you train and lead adults, and how do you understand yourself and be a leader for you in your life? So, sorry, long answer, short short question. The answer is, if you align yourself, understand what your values are as a human being, and you align your life and your career, working life as well, your career to those, um, then anything is possible. If you're in a situation where your environment around you does not align with your values, then it becomes super hard work and you don't tend to achieve a lot other than becoming emotionally and physically exhausted.
Which points very much to leadership being about understanding your own impact. Quite
Sure.
clear theme there about choices. Don't, choose where to go. I've often talked to people when they say, in fact, I was doing this on the Aspiring Chief Exec course not that long ago, and both cohorts I did a session with, and they were asking me about roles, and I said, you're choosing to go there. No one's forcing you to go there. Make the right choices to go there, because you spend, your point, I think, Tony, a lot of time there and a lot of energy. Therefore, it's got to be the right aligned thing, hasn't it?
Mm.
And we forget that, don't we?
It's tough, and there are lots of leaders, chief execs, and others that haven't had the insight you've just shared there. I'm not sure. You do meet these people, and you go, "Why are you here? You're clearly not enjoying it in leadership." If I There is no one magic bullet to turn around the NHS or to solve it. But one of the fundamental building blocks that we absolutely have to work on and transform and double down our efforts on is on supporting not just our existing leaders, but our aspiring leaders. How do we support them, help them find their why, help them be fulfilled, and help them be amazing in what they do? And I'm passionate and driven, which is why when you said, would you come on and have a chat with me for half an hour, I said, that's 100%. It's leadership is one of the most, they're the easiest people to throw something at, aren't they? And everyone's going to judge you as a leader. Oh, everyone. And it's one of the things, and so one of the other great things that I suppose I've been lucky with is having great mentors. I've been so fortunate. My current ICB chair, Professor Mike Thorne, who was my vice chancellor at ARU, has been one of my life mentors. Another one was Bruce Keogh, our former national medical director. And Bruce taught me early on, more than a decade ago, when I started at NHS England, about self-judgment and about suspending it. He said, Tony, it's a luxury you can't afford if you want to be a leader. He said, I get out of bed in the morning and people are already judging me before I've left the front door. After I've left the front door, everyone's judging me. If I judge myself, I won't get out of bed in the morning. I have to just, he said, well, you won't become some arrogant, egotistical narcissist. That's not it. He said, you have to just not have that level of self-judgment. Get out, get on, believe in what you do, be true to your values, stick to them. And that taught me a lot, because it's quite British, isn't it, to be self-judging and a bit self-deprecating. And actually, if you really want to be a leader and you want to change and transform services, suspending that self-judgment, at least partially, is a really important thing. Yeah. Sorry. I'm not sure why I went down that rabbit hole, but there we are.
No, but it's important, isn't it? Because I just listening to you, I think the ability to do that as a leader, though, has to be based on something solid, because otherwise life's too tough, isn't it? And we're not to get sometimes we're too fragile in many ways. And going back to what you said about finding core purpose, really understanding your own self, your value base allows you to be less critical and not worried about what's being thrown at you. And then Bruce's point, that you can get out the door every day because actually you've almost got that deflections shield to say, no, I've got a purpose and I know what you're doing. Now, the important thing is not to be a wombat and an idiot, how you go about it, but actually understanding your own effectiveness should mitigate against that, shouldn't it?
No, sure, I agree. I think, do you know, I mean, there are so many factors you can bring in, and I suppose one of the things, the ability to just spend time with great leaders and observe them. You know, I've sat on a few NHS England boards, and I know the characters behind the scenes. And when you see how they operate on the board as well, you kind of so one of the thing. So Bob Keegan talks about it a bit in his book, and I'm a big fan of his. But the other one is Daniel Kahneman and his Thinking Fast and Slow, you know, the economics prize winner who had his System 1 and System 2. So 80% of what we do is automatic behaviors. And so I knew, I recall the last one board I went to, and I knew most of the characters around the board, and I get to know the human being. I always do that. If you know the person, authentically know them and are interested. I love people. I love their stories. I love how their minds work. I love why they're doing what they're doing. It's how I remember things. So I knew a little bit about each of the board members. And when you know that, and you know Bob Keegan's work, which talks about behaviours, are you know, delivered by our assumption matrix, and our assumption matrix is created from our core values. And then you combine it with Daniel Kahneman's work, which 80% of what we do is automatic, based on pre-programmed templates, so pre-programmed behaviours. I knew that 80% of the behaviours I was seeing around that board table were pre-programmed based on their values. So you could sit there and I could work out, I know exactly why you've responded to that question from that person in that way, but they don't see why you've responded like that. And if you can understand someone, put yourself in their shoes, literally, not just in their professional shoes, but understand how their mind thinks and how they're going to, being given the set of priorities they've got, deal with that. And I was listening to them. I'm going, well, I know exactly how, I won't name the individuals, are going to respond to the challenge you've just given them. And lo and behold, they responded in exactly the way you would expect them to. And I'm going, so you could have predicted that before and not asked the question, and then we could have moved on a lot more quickly and actually been more effective. So it's quite, when you see that and you understand it, you can unlock all sorts of things. It's quite remarkable, actually.
Do you find that you're being I'm using the word clinical leader. It's a broad concept. It's a broad church, but you when you lead in your clinical work in the trust, when you're upfront infusing, leading the clinical entrepreneurs, and then when you're around the NHS England board table, are you adapting your leadership style in those elements, or is this pretty much the same?
So do you know, one of the
This
things
is
I
not a
was told
confessional, by the way, Tony. This is just,
it's not, no, it's not confessional. One of the things I was told when I first started at NHS England, and it's true, the same answer is true for this, is my old boss said to me, Tony, people assume a degree of sophistication at the centre that simply doesn't exist. And I think you've assumed a degree of sophistication in how I deal with things that simply doesn't exist. I just be myself. I think if you're decent, if you're honest, if you have the right values, if you work hard, and you trust in the system, occasionally you'll have to go through processes and procedures and things where you get them all. We know all that, and there are difficult times too. But if you stick to those, it kind of comes out right. So there's no, and the one thing I've learned not to be is Machiavelli. Political schemers and plotters, well, they're all gone. And I think if I'm not the longest serving national clinical leader at NHS England, I am among the last few of them there. It's nearly 12 years now. So, and I would never, I'm just open. I set the parameters when I'm talking to people. I say open, honest, plain speaking, private and vulnerable. Open, you can say what you like. Plain speaking, I'm not applying to a job in the Foreign Office. Private is between you and I. And vulnerable, because we can talk about the mistakes. It's okay to say, well, we got it wrong in this context now, because then we'll really learn and move things forward. And that ability to be able to share, I really screwed this up, what do we do, is so powerful. And when I tell people, because people look at you and go, oh, it's been so successful, look at what you've done. And I go, if you show the mistakes, there's like 10 times the number of
long
mistakes
sheet
behind
was
me.
all,
Yeah, massive.
And the reason I asked that wasn't because I assumed that was going to be what you said and would do, because you would have been
Because you
found out
read
by
Bob
now.
Keegan's book and
Well,
you
no,
knew what my automatic
but A,
messages
what you've
were.
just said, but B, you probably would have been found out by now, and
Sure.
there's a consistency in how you work. But there is that assumption often that people are different because of those different things, or they will want to be different in the next role. And I think you said something interesting earlier about is that contentment and that centeredness in what you're doing before you move on and do something else.
Well, yeah, it's true, but a number. So I I think a thing I would say I've observed about leadership or about successful leadership or really great leaders I admire, whether and I've met lots of I would say great political leaders, actually great business leaders from some of the titans of our biggest tech companies globally, and other academics and other leaders, is the ability to learn from others without having to do the primary work yourself, just being able to take that on board. And so many people have told me, Tony, don't ever be a chief exec in the NHS or go and take on an executive
Yeah,
medical director role.
don't do
It
that.
will
Yeah,
it will kill you.
yeah,
And it's a sad indictment of the way structures in our organizations have evolved, that people say that in a way. And I suppose what I've been spending my time doing is kind of building a movement of people that say there's a different paradigm here. We can lead in a different way. I mean, if you look at some of the things I've managed to change or contribute to the change of NHS, if I just went into battle and fought for it, I mean, I'd be finished and gone with the rest of them. But so, an example was a week ago today. For the first time in 23 years, the NHS published new intellectual property and technology transfer guidelines for the whole nation. And I've been banging on about that ever since I got to NHS England. They were published in 2002. No one was interested. It wasn't a priority. Eventually, I persuaded, I think it was Malcolm Grant, our chair, that he would support it, and various things derailed it. And then Lord Pryor was supportive, and then I can't remember if it was Brexit or the pandemic at that stage that derailed it then. And anyway, eventually I kept going and going and just listening to people, and it wasn't my views that were right as a surgeon. Surgeons often think they're right, and it was listening to other people's views and perspective of what they really wanted, and that I was someone in the centre who could influence. And so eventually a new Labour government came in. Someone made the mistake. It was kind of a planned mistake, I think, a little bit, that I got to speak just before Baroness Merrin, the new health minister. So she heard me speak, and she just came up and said, "Oh, wow, Tony, how this is amazing!" And she'd heard all the work we were doing, and she's just telling me what's going on. What are the real issues that are going on? We spoke about intellectual property and how it was hampering economic growth, how it was hampering us getting ideas off bits of paper. People have got great ideas across the health service for transforming care, but they couldn't get it off the paper and into their clinics and into widespread clinical use across the system. And I said, this is one of the fundamental building blocks. And she laughed and she said, well, the Mental Health Act hasn't been revised for longer than 23 years, Tony. But she said, just prepare a report for me, will you? And so I can take a view on it. And that was all I needed. The machinery at the Department of Health then swung into place, we've been asked by a minister to look at the policy and procedures that should have been updated a long time ago. 18 months later, having done some pretty extensive consultation and bringing a whole load of people with us, we published a really short set of principles, of guidelines of what the NHS had to do. And the really wonderful thing was we had case example after case example of best practice from down in the southwest to up in the northeast, to academic centres of excellence, to pretty ordinary run-of-the-mill places that were doing absolutely extraordinary things. And by giving so many people the opportunity to contribute, they all took ownership of it. And the number of comments we've had on social media, the number of organisations contacting us at NHS England and at the Department of Health to say, thank you. We just needed permission. We need to be told, you do. It is a responsibility. You do have to have an IP policy and a tech transfer arrangement. You get public money. These are the guidelines. You do have to do that. It's part of your arrangements. And guess what? Here's rough frameworks for you of how you can build that and put around. And here are some great examples, from digital to diagnostics, from med tech to AI, and everyone just went. And it allows people to be autonomous, to look at their local assets and be creative around it. And I learned so much about how to actually get an effective new policy in place, and that will help us. The new health minister, Zabir Ahmed, I mean, it's the first time we have ever had a surgeon who's been elected an MP who's then become a health minister. We've had a surgeon before as a health minister, but he wasn't elected. And so Zabir, and he's got a real bit between the teeth of saying, how can we turn a national health service into a national growth service? How can we unleash the potential of our workforce, take their greatest ideas, help empower them to help us transform the system? And so we kind of do that, of course, through the clinical entrepreneur program. 1,500 frontline clinicians on our program. It is the world's largest entrepreneurial workforce development program. And if you think I'm a little bit off the wall, outside of the normal range, you go into a room with 1,500 of them. It's explosive, the environment. It is just sensational. People go away going, I feel like I've just been injected with a can-do attitude and all the energy and enthusiasm. And now I've got to go back to my day job.
Here's the thing, Tony. You make all this sound so wonderfully simple, which is probably one of those arts of leadership anyway, because and you've been very patient. You've forgotten patience because it's taken you a long time to get that policy out, but you've got it through the door. But just go back to 1,500 entrepreneurs, enthused clinicians. Why, therefore, do we sometimes get it so wrong when we can infuse clinicians about entrepreneurship and making change? And that you've just started to say, and then they're back into their organizations. And the next bit is, and it's so hard. and sometimes it's hard entrepreneurial, but sometimes it's hard clinical wise. Where is the balance, and what are the things that we need to alter for our clinicians that helps them to do the things that you've described about yourself, to know themselves, to be effective, to be focused, and therefore make that massive difference, whatever they're doing?
It's why on this podcast with you, because it's leadership.
Yeah.
I have had the privilege and the honor of, Pete, I would stand on stages 10 years ago and say, I'm going to make the NHS the most entrepreneurial healthcare system in the world. And people would laugh. Literally, they'd be in the audience laughing. And I'm not a comedian. So that wasn't the response I was expecting. But here we are 10 years later, 1,500 frontline clinicians, 600 new life science companies founded, over 200 million patients and professionals benefiting from the innovations that we can count, and now around 1.5 billion pounds of external investment in those companies, mostly from venture capital, to transform the NHS through innovation. What do we need to do? Well, I thought I created an entrepreneur program, but we're now looking at the data for this year. We're going to audit it properly and look at it. It turns out more of them have gone on to become leaders in the NHS. Probably over 500 of them now have become clinical directors, medical directors, business unit leaders, PCN directors, ICB leaders in some roles, training program directors, other educational lead roles that they have taken on in the system. And a number of my national clinical colleagues at NHS England have been through the programme now. And you just realize that actually one of the core things you can, it's, people might think it's easy to, innovation, entrepreneurship is easy to enthuse people. We need to do this for leadership. We need to, people say, oh, innovation, entrepreneurship, it's so sexy and it's exciting. I get that. Leadership is that. But somewhere along the way, and there's no one group that's responsible for where we are. I think it's a changing time and environment and different things. And I'm not going to pin it on any particular Royal College, for example, on trainees and why resident doctors feel so disenfranchised from the system. I know you tend to look back with rose-tinted glasses, but I'll go round to my consultant's house for dinner with their families often, and the whole firm would go and do that. We felt connected. We felt they knew us. Now it feels transactional. I'm there for a shift. I'm doing this. I don't really know the people. They're not connected to me and my life and my future. Well, on the Entrepreneur Program, I've recreated that with our regular events where we meet up, and I'll help any of them anytime. And in leadership, it is if we want to be a nation that transforms our services, makes the latest, greatest technology and advances in medicines and science available to our patients, we have to have the leadership within it to deliver that. And that is why, if I had to put my money or my chips on something, I would invest it in leaders. We want whole, rounded, fulfilled, value-driven leaders. And at the moment, and we need it across whether you're a clinical leader, so a surgeon or a medic or an anaesthetist, whatever it is, or whether you're a leader that's come up through our management training programs or others, or a nursing leader. We need all of them and need to encourage them and support them. And I've got a feeling that might be where I kind of, in entrepreneurship, you learn that it's all very exciting. Who's going to win a Nobel Prize and do X, Y, and Z? Well, actually, the huge companies are built from bread and butter things, those mundane, everyday things. We have to have a budget for it. It costs us a lot of money. We have to do this. And one of the real bread and butter things is leadership. I say, well, if anyone out there wants to start some kind of leadership or transform an existing leadership program or business that we have, and how I think NHS leaders are, as a CEO, you must find this in the NHS, your spare brain capacity to be able to do this creative thinking, to understand your organization, to really get to know it, and it's almost impossible, and you're never going to do it. And that's why in the military, they use this kind of, you can have a command and control thing where standard military leadership comes down from the top, filters all the way down to the front line, and then decisions are made at the top, so it has to go all the way back from the front line. Or you can have this kind of mission system where everyone knows what the mission is, and then teams get on, they set the parameters within there to deliver the mission, and the CEO just goes around checking that, topping them up with water, making sure they've got enough training, making sure they're all right, and the teams are delivering on the mission they've been set to deliver it within the parameters. And the military do that all the time in their structures. It's how they talk about how, the Russian military might have, I don't know how many millions of soldiers in it at the moment, but it is command and control, front line, back up to the top in Moscow and then back. And as Brits, we could never do it. So we had to have these kind of mission control things where you would set small teams up, mission driven, so decisions could be made more than 10 times faster. And therefore, we could have 10 times less troops than they had and still be an effective fighting force.
Yeah.
So rapid decision-making, autonomy within teams, properly supported leadership, and people who are trusted, who are valued, people who who you genuinely connect with. You understand, I can't get in today, my kids are sick, and my wife's working, and so I've got to come. And for that being okay. When you hear of resident doctors who say, I'm getting married in a year, I've already booked the venue, but the new hospital I'm rotating to wouldn't let me have my wedding day off because I'm on a rota. I go, what?
We've lost
no.
the plot, haven't we?
It's just, but the pressures you are under as a chief exec, Matthew, of a NHS organisation can be immense. You can be
Yeah,
held
but
to account.
it's not an
And
excuse. I mean,
no,
everybody's under that pressure, but it's your point is salient. It's how you respond to that, knowing that actually the role of leadership is essentially relational. I mean, it's highly. I sit in here highly thinking it's highly ironic that I'm sitting with the national leader for entrepreneurship who spends lots of time thinking big tech, AI, and all the things that you've mentioned. But at the source of it, you're talking of a creed about knowing oneself, being relational, and being effective and impactful as a human being. And that's the basis of it all, isn't it?
well, I tell you, that's how our entrepreneurs who built companies that have raised millions, tens of millions, and are now turning over those amounts. I coach them all. And we take really promising, talented individuals, and the so many of them are now starting to set up in America, and the Americans are going, where is this wave of British entrepreneurial life science startups coming from? And they're starting to come over here. I get to meet them. We had a number of the big hospital groups in America come over and see us recently and talk about, what can we learn from you? What are you doing? These guys are solving real problems that we need solved, and they're starting to win big, getting a contract in the NHS. One of them, and I won't name it for commercial reasons, has been over there, done a trial in hospital. It looks like a £30 million contract over the next 3 years if it goes through. And I'm just going, and they can't believe, they said, we've never seen anything like this. It's incredible. It will transform our business model. So you can support really talented people who've got those core elements in it to just be amazing at who they really are and what they do. And then you deliver, in this case, amazing startups, but you could deliver an amazing health service too. And leadership is, if I had to put all my chips on red or black or whatever it is, I will put it on leadership.
Okay, so last thing, because I could talk to you for hours, and I know you've got other things you need to do. You're a busy guy, and I don't want to overburden you. Here's the
Well,
thing.
Matthew, actually, I'm at a conference in Birmingham and you're keeping me from the bar, to be honest. So
I
let's
was being
be
polite. I
honest.
was being
You
polite.
were, you were.
But last thing then, what's the one thing you, without repeating where you've got into in leadership, but if
Sure.
you can say, look, deliver the 10-year plan, what was one of the practical things in leadership that if it was to be the next thing that Tony Young gets involved with, what do you think would be really beneficial in leadership terms that we could deliver those really fundamental elements that the government have set those ambitions on? Of
Okay.
outside of your program, because you can't answer with analog to digital.
Thank you for setting my boundaries and giving me the freedom of an open question, which is always a great mark of leadership. So there is something, but it mustn't be, this is the next thing Tony Young's going to go and do, because when you personalize it to an individual, it nearly
It's just not
always
helpful.
fails.
Yeah.
How, other than people who've listened to this podcast, very few people will ever know I was responsible, or the clinical lead for sure, for the first update in intellectual property guidelines for 23 years. And that's how it should be. Everyone should take, and I played a very key and facilitating role, but actually there were hundreds and hundreds of people that without them and their involvement, it wouldn't have had what it had. So this is not about the next thing I'm going to. How I would answer is say, what have I observed going on? What's bubbling up under the surface? What could we unearth and just help come forward and flourish? So I think there is something in leadership. Mid and South Essex, where I am at the moment, it's no secret. It's in the public domain. We didn't get a great CQC. We got downgraded in a number of areas, and our leadership was one of the things that was highlighted in that CQC report. So I have stepped forward within the organisation to say, come on, what can we do about it? And do you know another leadership programme where you sit down and someone tells you how to be a leader? On its own, they can be quite useful, and there are some excellent ones out there, but we need something more. So the thing I am toying with, and if you're interested, Matthew, well, maybe we could do something about it, and maybe others might be interested in it. How could we create a network of kind of peer-to-peer mentors in leadership, and then kind of senior leaders who can act as kind of coaches, maybe mentors too? I've had a conversation with a number of my national clinical leader colleagues, national medical director colleagues, and others, regional medical directors, others, who'd be really keen to join such a network. And so, how, for example, at MSE, can we help all of our newly appointed clinical directors get some of the basic nuts and bolts education around leadership and that you need? But then, could we tie that together with a peer-to-peer network, with a more senior coaching network, and then actually take a real problem in their service, something that they have to deal with, and then match them to an innovation that NHS England has been supporting, whether it's through the Entrepreneur Programme or our National Innovation Accelerator or SBRI Healthcare or one of our other programs that we have. Our Health Innovation Network support a number of people across the country. So could we take something that's already been tested and trialed, and could we help them then incubate that innovation within their service so they're getting the understanding of innovation and transformation and pathway change? It's quite exciting. It's quite different. They're being mentored by, say, a clinical director from a specialty in South Essex. Is someone from your neck of the woods is being a kind of a peer-to-peer buddy to help them do it. And could we then have a senior person who's been there and done it and got the scars and just chip in and give some advice and thoughts and guidance and help them grow and develop? And I think tying it together with that, I haven't, now you may tell me, Matthew, Tony, I can tell you it's already been invented and it's been done and it's this. If that's the case, fantastic. I'll just go and pick it up. But if not, that's what we're planning to do at Mid and South Essex. And I'm going to run the experiment and go, if that works, imagine if you had a network of leaders who supported each other, who could just have a conversation once a month, half an hour or so. God, how's it going in your patch? We've had terrible with this and that. How did you get through that and deal with that? Reconnecting people, reconnecting our leaders, and building those relationships. So that's an experiment. All I do is run experiments, and I quite want to run that one, and my trust want me to run it. So we're going to have a look and see, I think. Who knows?
Sounds exciting. But interestingly, even if it has been done somewhere else, it needs to be right for your trust because they need all the support they can get, don't they? And actually, I feel that's, a final thought was maybe you do so much to do that on a national basis and obviously an international basis. You've described there are some very distressed organizations in the NHS that will actually, it's our responsibility to lean into to get that right. And, I think you're on it. It's actually make a difference, but you've got to make a difference in small areas in a repeated way. And it really blossoms, doesn't it?
They may be distressed organizations, but whenever I've been into any of them, they're full of amazing people.
Absolutely.
And we've had real trouble at Mid and South Essex. Someone I know at the university, both her parents have been admitted to Southend Hospital recently. She couldn't be more complimentary of the kind, caring, personal attention, both her, but whose lives have been saved by the staff on the wards. So even though we're under pressure, under stress as an organisation, have we got amazing care going on? Come on, that's when leaders need to step forward and go, we've got these assets, we can do it. We can.
And let's allow them all to flourish. Absolutely. That's the way to transform an organization, not top down. It never works in that respect. Tony, it's been fascinating listening to you. You're a urologist, associate medical director, this innovation. You were given your, Bob Keegan's kind of view on life and the synergizing that coaching expertise to help you understand yourself. A really good example of actually someone who can focus on the right things, but it was about values, avoiding burnout, being fulfilled in what you do. Interesting that you mentioned time and time again the really positive uses of coaches, mentors, and as you say, sometimes people just aren't using those really great mechanisms to help people grow and be effective in what they are. And then, but as you just say, leading forward. Leadership is the key, being relational and embedding that in everything that we can do. I would say you clearly want to get some help, develop that new experiment at Mid and South Essex and help with leadership and being innovative in what they do. And I'm sure people will be knocking down your door, and I may well offer my services, Tony, to come and do whatever I can until you realise I'm a complete fraud and you'll get rid of me. But that's a different story.
Matthew, I'll have the shirt off your back for the NHS and I'll be shameless about it too.
Tony, thank you so much for joining me on Leadership and Culture in Healthcare. It's been fascinating. You're a star, and enjoy infusing the world at your conference and leading forward.
Thank you very much, Matthew.